Marcus Reed stood in the quiet of his front yard, staring at the letter that had arrived that morning. His calloused hands, hardened by decades of tending to his sprawling property, trembled slightly as he unfolded the thick envelope. It was official. His worst fears had come true. The Homeowners Association, led by the imperious Lydia Patterson, the woman who had for months tried to control every facet of his life, had slapped him with a $50,000 fine. Marcus's eyes scanned each line of the letter, his heart sinking with every word. For years, he had run his farm with a quiet pride and independence, welcoming visitors to enjoy the fresh produce, homemade goods, and the natural beauty of his land. His farm stand wasn't just a business. It was a manifestation of his life's work and his commitment to sustainable living. But now, in the crisp light of morning, that passion was under attack. The HOA's fine was not just a financial blow. It was a declaration that they intended to dictate every aspect of his livelihood. Lydia Patterson had long harbored a disdain for any deviation from the neighborhood's sterile uniformity. To her, Marcus's farm stand, with its vibrant colors, rustic charm, and the unmistakable aroma of freshly picked vegetables, was a disruption to the pristine order of Crescent Meadows. The fine was meant to force him into submission, to make him conform to a vision of bland perfection that she believed was essential for the community's image. As Marcus clutched the letter, anger and disbelief battled within him. He knew that the only road leading to his property, an old, winding drive carved out by his forefathers, was a lifeline that connected his sanctuary to the rest of the world. And now, the HOA was using its power to penalize him for simply operating his business the way he saw fit. In that heavy, silent moment, Marcus realized that this was not just about a fine. It was about a battle for his rights, a battle against a bureaucracy that sought to control every inch of his land. And he vowed then that he would not be cowed. The fine was a wake-up call, and Marcus was ready to fight back with every resource at his disposal. Crescent Meadows was renowned for its picture-perfect streets, manicured lawns, and identical houses that spoke of suburban conformity. Nestled within this uniform community was the local Homeowners Association, HOA, an organization that prided itself on enforcing a strict code of aesthetics and behavior. Every detail, from the height of the hedges to the color of holiday decorations, was monitored with an unwavering eye. In this meticulously curated environment, individual expression was often seen as a threat to communal harmony. At the center of this enforcement regime was Lydia Patterson, a formidable figure in her early 50s known to all as HOA Lydia. Clad in conservative suits, with a clipboard always in hand and a smartphone glued to her ear, Lydia roamed Crescent Meadows with an air of self-importance. Her mission was simple: maintain order, preserve property values, and ensure that every resident adhered strictly to the established rules. To those who knew her, Lydia was both a guardian of community standards and a relentless enforcer whose penalties were as severe as they were indiscriminate. In stark contrast to the rigid order of Crescent Meadows was Marcus Reed's property, a sprawling farm that had been in his family for generations. Marcus had inherited not only the land, but a legacy of hard work, creativity, and a deep love for nature. His farm stand was the heart of his operation, a vibrant display of fresh produce, homemade preserves, and the rustic charm that set his business apart from the cookie-cutter establishments in town. Marcus's approach to life was one of independence and innovation. He believed that the beauty of a community lay in its diversity and that every resident should be free to express themselves, even if that meant a little chaos in an otherwise orderly neighborhood. While many residents of Crescent Meadows silently accepted the HOA's strict rules for fear of fines and social ostracism, Marcus had always stood firm in his convictions. He cherished the freedom to run his farm on his own terms, an ethos passed down through generations. His property was not just a source of livelihood. It was a canvas upon which he painted his vision of sustainable living and local heritage. From the rustic charm of his weathered barn to the hand-painted sign at his farm stand, every detail spoke of a life lived authentically and without compromise. Over time, tensions had been simmering between Marcus and the HOA. Lydia Patterson's relentless scrutiny had led to numerous fines and complaints, each one a small jab at his right to operate his business as he saw fit. The latest blow, a staggering $50,000 fine, was the culmination of months of petty, bureaucratic harassment. It was a financial and emotional wound, one that threatened not just his business, but his very way of life. As Marcus looked out over his land, he recalled the history of that solitary road leading to his property, a road that his ancestors had built with calloused hands and unyielding determination. That road was more than a mere connection to the outside world. It was a symbol of his family's independence. Now, the HOA was trying to control that very lifeline, using fines as a weapon to force conformity. Determined not to let them succeed, Marcus knew he had to fight back by reclaiming his property rights and showing the community that true freedom could not be dictated by arbitrary fines. His next steps would not only challenge the oppressive power of the HOA, but also ignite a movement among those who believe in the right to live authentically and independently. The conflict reached a boiling point the day the fine arrived. Marcus's routine had always been simple. Open the mail, read the letter, and then get to work. But that morning, as he unfolded the thick envelope and scanned the harsh, official language, his blood ran cold. The letter stated unequivocally that due to unauthorized property modifications and aesthetic disturbances, terms so vague and arbitrary that they defied logic, he was being fined $50,000. It was a punishment not for any real infraction, but for daring to express his individuality through the vibrant displays at his farm stand. For months, Lydia Patterson had targeted Marcus, scrutinizing every detail of his operations. Every time he installed a new sign, every time he introduced a splash of color to his otherwise rustic property, a fine would follow. Each penalty was a reminder that in Crescent Meadows, deviation from the HOA's stringent standards was met with ruthless financial retribution. Marcus had tried to reason with the board, to explain that his farm stand was a celebration of local culture and sustainable living. But his pleas fell on deaf ears, drowned out by the relentless voice of conformity that Lydia wielded like a weapon. Outraged by the injustice, Marcus decided that this fine was the final straw, a call to arms. He knew that if he simply paid the fine, it would only encourage further overreach by the HOA. Instead, he began to gather evidence of his compliant operations, records of his legal permits, photographs documenting the beauty and order of his property, and testimonials from longtime customers who cherished the authentic charm of his farm stand. Every piece of evidence underscored the fact that his property was operated within the bounds of the law and that his creative expressions were not a threat, but an asset to the community. With a growing dossier in hand, Marcus took to the community forums. He posted his story, complete with scanned copies of the fine and snapshots of the neglected, impersonal standards imposed by the HOA. His posts resonated deeply with many residents, especially those who had long felt that the strict rules of Crescent Meadows stifled their own creativity and freedom. The digital conversation quickly exploded, with hashtags like #PropertyRightsNow and #NoMoreHOBullying trending among the community. But Marcus wasn't finished. He knew that mere words would not suffice. He needed a bold, public statement to reclaim his rights. His eyes turned to the one asset that connected his property to the rest of Crescent Meadows, the solitary road leading to his farm, a road built by generations, a road that symbolized his family's independence. Marcus realized that if the HOA could fine him for having that road on his land, then they were clearly overstepping their authority. And that was an opportunity. Drawing on legal advice and fueled by righteous indignation, Marcus devised a plan to challenge the fine in the most public way possible. He would mobilize the community to demand that the HOA board review their policies, and he would leverage his legal right to the road, a right that belonged solely to him. His plan was twofold. First, he would launch a digital petition demanding the rescission of the $50,000 fine and a thorough review of HOA practices. Second, he would prepare to confront the board at the next scheduled meeting, armed with evidence and the support of a now united community. As the days passed, Marcus's digital petition gathered momentum. Neighbors from all corners of Crescent Meadows shared their own grievances about arbitrary fines and restrictive rules. The collective anger was palpable, and every shared post reinforced the message that property rights were non-negotiable. Meanwhile, Marcus continued to document every moment of his struggle, updating his online community with detailed reports and behind-the-scenes footage of his property. His unwavering determination and clear evidence of injustice began to tip the scales. The HOA board, already under increasing pressure from the community, scheduled an emergency meeting to address the growing controversy. In the days leading up to the meeting, Marcus reached out to sympathetic board members and local legal experts, ensuring that every argument was backed by solid evidence and clear legal rationale. He knew that this was more than just about a fine. It was about reclaiming the very right to live freely and express individuality in a community that had long been dominated by arbitrary rules. As the board meeting loomed, the tension in Crescent Meadows reached a fever pitch. The digital dossier Marcus had assembled was the linchpin of a grassroots movement that challenged the very foundations of HOA authority. And as he prepared to present his case, he could feel that the final confrontation was inevitable. A turning point that would force the board to either change its oppressive policies or risk the wrath of a united, empowered community. In the days following the fine, the digital firestorm ignited by Marcus's story engulfed Crescent Meadows. Social media platforms were awash with video clips, screenshots, and heartfelt testimonials from residents who had long suffered under the HOA's arbitrary enforcement. Hashtags such as #PropertyRightsNow, #NoMoreHOBullying, and #StandUpForFreedom trended across local online communities, and the digital petition Marcus had launched quickly amassed tens of thousands of signatures. What began as a single fine became a rallying cry for everyone who believed that property rights were inviolable and that personal expression was a cornerstone of community spirit. Local news outlets caught wind of the controversy, sending reporters to Crescent Meadows to cover the unfolding drama. Cameras captured images of frustrated homeowners gathered in front of the HOA office, and interviews with longtime residents revealed a deep-seated resentment toward the stringent policies imposed by the board. "We're tired of living in a community where our creativity is stifled and our rights are trampled upon," one resident declared on live TV. The narrative quickly shifted from a personal dispute to a broader commentary on the dangers of bureaucratic overreach and the importance of defending individual freedoms. Within the HOA board, divisions that had long been hidden beneath layers of protocol now erupted into open conflict. Emergency meetings were held behind closed doors, and leaked minutes revealed a bitter struggle among board members. Some staunchly defended the existing policies, arguing that maintaining strict order was essential for preserving property values. Others, swayed by the overwhelming digital evidence and the passionate voices of residents, contended that the board had lost touch with the community's needs. This fine is not just about one man's farm stand. It's about our collective right to live and work without being bullied by arbitrary rules. One board member was overheard saying, his voice tinged with both anger and resignation. As pressure mounted, Marcus's online updates became a beacon for those fighting for change. He posted detailed accounts of every incident, from the receipt of the $50,000 fine to the mounting evidence of the HOA's heavy-handed tactics. His blog and social media channels were filled with images of his thriving farm stand, historical documents proving his property rights, and video testimonials from neighbors who had been similarly victimized. The digital community rallied behind him, and every post added weight to the growing movement demanding that the HOA board be held accountable. In response to the public outcry, the HOA board announced a final public hearing to address the fine and review their enforcement practices. The announcement sent shockwaves through Crescent Meadows. In the days leading up to the hearing, residents organized peaceful rallies, distributed flyers, and held small meetings in their front yards, all united under the banner of reclaiming their rights. Every shared post, every hashtag, and every comment on community forums reinforced one undeniable truth. The power of an overzealous HOA was no match for the united voice of a community determined to preserve its freedom. On the morning of the hearing, the community center was packed with residents. Neighbors, many of whom had experienced fines for the smallest deviations from HOA rules, filled every seat, their faces a mixture of hope, determination, and a long-suppressed desire for change. The air buzzed with anticipation, and as Marcus took his place among the speakers, his digital dossier, complete with screenshots, video clips, and legal documents, was projected on a large screen for all to see. Every piece of evidence served as a testament to the absurdity of the $50,000 fine and the broader pattern of arbitrary enforcement that had plagued Crescent Meadows. The tension in the room was palpable. Every whispered conversation, every nod of agreement confirmed that the community was ready to reject the oppressive control of the HOA. The final hearing was not just a chance to contest one fine. It was a defining moment in the struggle for individual rights and creative freedom in Crescent Meadows. The stage was set for a dramatic showdown that would force the board to either defend their outdated policies or embrace a new era of transparency, fairness, and respect for the rights of every resident. The decisive moment arrived on a cool, crisp morning in a packed boardroom at the Crescent Meadows Community Center. The room was filled with a mix of HOA officials, local law enforcement representatives, community leaders, and a sea of determined residents, all gather for the final public hearing that would decide the fate of our community's enforcement policies. With an unwavering presence, Councilwoman Veronica James stepped up to the podium, her eyes reflecting the hope and resolve of a community that had long been silenced by arbitrary power. After a thorough review of all digital evidence, including time-stamped security footage, comprehensive records of fines and complaints, and the impassioned testimonies of our residents, we have reached an inescapable conclusion. Councilwoman James began, her voice resonating with authority. It is abundantly clear that the $50,000 fine imposed on Mr. Reed was not founded on any legitimate breach of community standards, but was a baseless, arbitrary punishment driven by personal bias. Our community's rights as independent property owners must be upheld, and no one should have the power to dictate how we manage our land through punitive measures. A heavy silence fell over the room as James continued. Effective immediately, the HOA board will rescind all sanctions related to this incident, and we will launch a full disciplinary review of the policies that allowed such overreach to occur. Furthermore, new guidelines will be implemented to safeguard the creative and operational freedoms of every resident in Crescent Meadows. Today's decision is not merely about reversing an unjust fine. It is a resounding declaration that we will defend our rights and live free from arbitrary interference. Her words struck a chord, and murmurs of approval rippled through the assembly. At that moment, a well-respected community advocate, renowned for his steadfast commitment to individual freedom, rose to speak. Today, we stand united, he declared, his voice firm and impassioned. No resident should ever have their ability to manage their property or conduct their business compromised by the whims of an overzealous enforcer. Let this vote be the turning point, a clear signal that Crescent Meadows values innovation, independence, and the sanctity of private property above all else. We demand accountability, and we will not rest until every violation of our rights is met with swift, decisive action. His declaration was met with thunderous applause, uniting the room in a call for transformative change. Following his address, a senior official from the local regulatory office presented the final dossier, a meticulously compiled record of all digital evidence, expert testimonies, and official documents that confirmed the legitimacy of Mr. Reed's operations and exposed the baseless nature of the fine. The evidence was irrefutable. The fine was an arbitrary measure, and every action taken against Mr. Reed was a misuse of power. The Internal Affairs Panel unanimously endorsed strict disciplinary measures against those responsible for the fine, and the full report was scheduled for immediate public release. Councilwoman James concluded, Let this resolution mark the dawn of a new era for Crescent Meadows, a community where every resident's rights and freedoms are respected, and where public authority is exercised with integrity and fairness. Our vote today is a resounding declaration that we will protect our individual rights and that no one can impose their personal biases on our community without accountability. Together, we stand for justice, transparency, and the inalienable right to live and operate freely on our own land. Her final words, delivered with unwavering conviction, sealed the turning point in our battle for property rights and creative freedom. In that defining moment, as every face in the boardroom shone with determination and hope, the balance of power shifted irrevocably. The overwhelming digital evidence and the unified voice of the community forced the HOA board to take decisive action, a turning point that would forever reshape the governance of Crescent Meadows. The days of arbitrary fines and oppressive oversight were over, and a future built on respect for individual rights was finally within our grasp. In the weeks that followed the historic vote, Crescent Meadows underwent a profound transformation. News of the rescinded $50,000 fine and the sweeping reforms enacted by the HOA board spread rapidly through local media and social networks, sparking fervent debates about property rights, creative freedom, and community governance. Editorials in the local newspaper, with headlines such as "A New Dawn for Crescent Meadows" and "Community United for Freedom," celebrated the decisive actions taken to protect every resident's right to manage their property without fear of arbitrary interference. Hashtags like #PropertyRights, #NoMoreHOA, and #StandForFreedom trended widely, reinforcing our collective determination to reject oppressive rule enforcement. Town hall meetings and community forums saw unprecedented attendance as residents gathered to share their experiences and envision a future where individuality and innovation were celebrated. Neighbors who had long been subdued by the rigid policies of the HOA now spoke openly about their right to express themselves and conduct business on their own terms. Our homes and our land are our legacies, and we must never allow anyone to dictate how we use them. One impassioned resident declared at a bustling meeting, his words resonating through the crowded room. The atmosphere was electric, a promise that Crescent Meadows would always defend the creative spirit and rights of its residents. Within the reformed HOA board and local public safety departments, swift changes were implemented. Senior officials, led by Director James Carter and Lieutenant Marcus Reed, launched comprehensive training programs focusing on ethical conduct, cultural sensitivity, and the responsible management of community resources. Regular internal audits and transparent disciplinary procedures were established to ensure that every complaint was scrutinized fairly and that no resident would ever again suffer under arbitrary fines. Our duty is to protect the rights and dignity of every member of our community, Lieutenant Reed affirmed during a follow-up press conference, reinforcing our renewed commitment to justice. Community leaders and local civil rights organizations mobilized to empower residents further. Workshops, public forums, and educational campaigns were organized to raise awareness about property rights and the importance of creative freedom. When we stand together, our voices can reshape even the most entrenched systems, a local activist proclaimed at a town hall meeting, inspiring residents to unite in the fight for a more inclusive governance model. For Marcus Reed, the journey from confrontation to resolution was deeply personal and transformative. His decision to stand up against an arbitrary $50,000 fine, a decision that challenged the overreach of the HOA, had not only reclaimed his right to operate his farm stand on his own land, but had ignited a movement that resonated throughout Crescent Meadows. Neighbors, who had long suffered in silence, now found their voices, sharing their own stories of resistance and triumph over bureaucratic tyranny. The digital evidence that had exposed the fine became a rallying cry for every resident who believed in the sanctity of private property and the right to live freely. Karen Miller, once the feared enforcer of the HOA's draconian policies, was now reduced to a cautionary tale, a vivid reminder that no one is above accountability when a community stands united for justice. Her influence waned rapidly as digital records of her past transgressions circulated widely, underscoring the need for reform and the perils of unchecked authority. At a final celebratory event held in the Central Park of Crescent Meadows, residents, local officials, and community advocates gathered under the soft glow of the setting sun. A large banner reading "Unity, Freedom, and Property Rights" was unfurled between towering oak trees, and heartfelt speeches echoed with promises of a brighter, more inclusive future. Today, we celebrate the victory of our rights over arbitrary interference, a victory for every homeowner and every independent spirit in our community, Councilwoman James proclaimed, her voice resolute and inspiring. The standing ovation that followed was a powerful affirmation of the community's collective commitment to protecting its freedoms. As each new day dawned over Crescent Meadows, the legacy of that fateful confrontation endured as a beacon of transformative change. The story of how an unjust $50,000 fine was levied, only to be challenged by the unwavering determination of a property owner who refused to be cowed, became a rallying cry for every resident. Every sunrise now carried the promise that in Crescent Meadows, truth, justice, and the right to live freely would forever prevail. In the end, what began as a personal battle evolved into a watershed moment for the entire community. United, vigilant, and unyielding in our fight against bureaucratic overreach, we emerged stronger than ever. And as the sun rose each morning over our reclaimed neighborhood, it carried with it the promise that Crescent Meadows would forever be a place where creativity, integrity, and respect for individual rights shone as bright as the morning light.